I believed paying for the venue meant I was welcome. But when my son's bride screamed at me to leave, the music stopped dead. I turned my back on the thousands of dollars I had spent on those flowers and walked toward the exit. I expected to be alone in the rain. I never imagined that the only person following me out of that glass conservatory would be the bride's own mother. My name is Margaret Holloway, but everyone in the small river town of Briar Glen, Pennsylvania, calls me Maggie. At 58 years old, I have learned that life is mostly about maintenance. You maintain your home, you maintain your credit score, and you maintain your dignity. I work as a senior claims analyst at Rivergate Benefits Group. It is not the kind of job that makes people lean in at dinner parties, but it suits me. My days are spent reviewing corporate welfare plans and insurance documents. I look for the things people try to hide in the fine print. I look for discrepancies. I look for the truth behind the numbers. I raised my son, Ethan, on that salary. I paid off my house on that salary. I prided myself on being steady, the kind of woman who kept her receipts and never let her emotions cloud the ledger. But nothing in my years of reviewing risk assessments prepared me for the wedding of my only child. Ethan was marrying Kelsey Whitmore. To say Kelsey was high maintenance would be an insult to the word. She was a woman who seemed to exist primarily through the lens of a camera. She was beautiful, certainly, with the kind of polished, manufactured perfection that requires a team of stylists and a ring light. She spoke about her wedding not as a union of two souls, but as a brand activation. She wanted everything to look expensive, despite the fact that Ethan was a junior architect and she worked sporadically as a lifestyle consultant, a title I still did not quite understand, because I wanted Ethan to be happy. I opened my checkbook. I paid the $5,000 deposit for the alder and glass conservatory. I paid the invoice for the florist, which came to nearly $4,000 for arrangements that would be dead by Sunday morning. I even co-signed the contract for the wedding planner, Darla Keene, because Kelsey insisted Darla was the only one who understood her vision. The pushing out began slowly, with tiny shoves I tried to ignore. At the rehearsal dinner the night before, I walked toward the head table, expecting to sit near my son. I found my place card at table 5, next to a distant cousin of Kelsey's who spent the entire meal texting. When I caught Kelsey's eye, she just gave a tight, apologetic smile that did not reach her eyes. "Oh, Mrs. Holloway, we had to shift things for the lighting," she said as she passed by my chair. "You understand? Mrs. Holloway. Not Mom, not Maggie, just a title. Cold and formal." Later that night, I checked my phone to see the timeline for the next day. The family group chat was gone. I had been removed. Then came the comment about my dress. It was a navy silk gown, tasteful and well-tailored. Kelsey stopped me by the bar, looking me up and down with a critical squint. "It is a little heavy, isn't it?" she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Maybe try not to circulate too much during the cocktail hour tomorrow. I am afraid you might dilute the concept. We want a very fresh, youthful vibe for the candid shots." I felt the sting of it in my chest, hot and sharp. I looked at Ethan, hoping he would step in. He was standing right there, nursing a beer, looking tired. "Mum, please," he whispered, leaning in so Kelsey would not hear him. "She is just stressed out. Do not make it a thing. Just let her have this." So I nodded. I swallowed the humiliation, because that is what mothers do. We absorb the impact so our children do not have to. I told myself I would get through the wedding day, smile for the pictures, and go home to my quiet house. But late that night, back in my hotel room. I opened the thin file folder I had brought with me. It was a habit from work. I never went to a meeting without my paperwork. I pulled out the contract for the venue. I stared at the bottom of the page. My name was there. Margaret Holloway. I was the one who had signed. I was the one financially liable for every broken glass and every overtime minute. I remembered asking Ethan about it months ago. Why am I the primary signer? Ethan? I had asked. It is just for the deposit return? Mum, he had said, waving his hand dismissively. It makes it easier to process the refund directly to you. Do not worry about the details. I ran my thumb over my signature. It was the only thing in this entire chaotic, expensive weekend that actually belonged to me. I did not know it then, but that piece of paper was about to become the most important document of my life. The alder and glass conservatory glowed like a massive, expensive lantern against the darkening sky. Inside, the atmosphere was less like a wedding and more like a film set. Warm amber uplighting washed over the glass walls, and a digital ticker tape ran along the base of the DJ booth, displaying the hashtag Whitmore Holloway Union in scrolling neon letters. Guests were already checking in on their phones, tagging the location before they had even taken a sip of champagne. I arrived 20 minutes early, clutching my leather handbag. Inside, I had a thick envelope containing a check that represented a significant portion of my savings, and tucked behind it was my thin manila file folder. It was a habit I could not break. I never walked into a room where my name was on the contract without a copy of the paperwork. I navigated through the crowd, intending to slip backstage to the bridal suite. I just wanted to hand Ethan a letter I had written the night before. It was not a long letter, just a few words telling him I was proud of the man he had become, regardless of the noise around us. Darla Keene, the wedding planner, intercepted me before I could even reach the velvet rope cordoning off the family area. She held a clipboard against her chest, like a shield. Mrs. Holloway, please stop, Darla said, her voice tight and professional. We have had a slight schedule change. You cannot go back there. I only need 2 minutes with my son. Darla, I said, keeping my voice low. Kelsey needs space right now, Darla insisted, stepping into my path. She is very focused. Please just take your seat in the second row. Second row, not the first. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach, but I nodded. I would not make a scene. Not yet. 10 minutes later, the bridal party emerged for the pre-ceremony family photos near the altar. I saw my opening. I smoothed my navy dress and took a step forward, smiling, ready to join the line next to my son. The moment my heel clicked on the marble floor of the altar space, Kelsey spun around. She looked breathtaking in white lace, but her face was twisted into a snarl that shattered the image instantly. Get out of here. Her voice cracked like a whip across the room. The string quartet stopped playing mid-measure. The chatter of 200 guests vanished into a suffocating silence. I froze, one hand half extended toward Ethan. Kelsey. I was just... No, she screamed, her face flushing red. I told Darla to keep you away. Today is for real family, not for people who think writing a check gives them the right to control my life. I am sick of you hovering. The accusation hung in the air, toxic and heavy. I looked at Ethan. This was the moment. This was when he would step forward, take my arm, and tell her to stop. This was when he would be the man I raised. Ethan did not move. He stood stiffly in his tuxedo, his eyes fixed on the floral arrangement at his feet. He looked like a statue. He looked like a coward. I realized then that his silence was not shock. It was rehearsed. He knew this was coming, and he had agreed to let it happen to keep the peace. The blood drained from my face, leaving me feeling hollow and lightheaded. I could feel hundreds of eyes burning into my back, phones raised to capture the drama. But I did not cry. I did not scream. I looked at Kelsey, then at my son's averted eyes. I nodded once. Slowly. Understood, I said softly. I walked over to the gift table. I took the thick envelope from my bag, the one with the generous check, and placed it deliberately on the stack of boxes. Then I turned around and walked down the center aisle. My heels clicked rhythmically on the stone floor, the only sound in the cavernous room. I pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped out into the cool evening air. The music inside had not started up again. I walked toward the parking lot, my hand gripping the file folder so hard my knuckles turned white. I expected to walk to my car alone. Then I heard the heavy doors open behind me, followed by the rapid clatter of heels on the pavement. I stopped and turned, expecting Darla coming to confiscate my phone or perhaps a security guard. It was Lorraine Whitmore. Kelsey's mother was standing there in her champagne-coloured gown, shivering slightly in the wind. Her face was pale, and her hands were shaking violently at her sides. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and realization. She had just heard her own daughter define family, and it seemed she had finally understood that she was on the chopping block too. A light drizzle had begun to fall, misting the windshields of the luxury cars filling the parking lot. I walked to my sedan, my keys clutched in my hand like a weapon. I did not run. I did not look back at the glowing glass structure where my son was currently exchanging vows without me. My heart was beating with a slow, heavy thud, but my mind was remarkably clear. It felt less like heartbreak and more like the cold, clinical detachment I felt when I denied a fraudulent insurance claim. Maggie, wait. The voice was breathless. I turned to see Lorraine Whitmore hurrying toward me, her heels skidding slightly on the wet pavement. She looked nothing like the composed mother of the bride she had been an hour ago. Her hair was damp, and her mascara was smudged beneath her eyes. I am sorry, Lorraine stammered, wrapping her arms around herself as the wind picked up. I did not realize it had gone this far. I thought it was just wedding stress. I looked at her. I did not feel the urge to scream or list the insults I had endured. That would have been a waste of energy. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered, my voice flat and even. Do you know who your daughter owes money to and whose name she is standing on to do it? Lorraine flinched. She looked toward the conservatory, then back at me, her face crumbling. She lost her contract with the marketing firm 3 months ago, Lorraine whispered, the words rushing out. She didn't want Ethan to know. She has been living on credit cards and loans. She said she needed this wedding to go viral. She said if she could just get the right sponsors, the right engagement numbers, she could launch her own brand and pay everyone back. She is desperate. Maggie. I placed my file folder on the hood of my car and opened it. The rain spotted the documents, but the ink remained clear. I pointed to the signature line on the venue contract, then the catering agreement, then the floral invoice. Look closely. Lorraine, I said, that is not Ethan's signature. And it certainly is not Kelsey's. It is mine. Lorraine stared at the papers, her hand covering her mouth. She told Ethan it was for administrative convenience. I continued, closing the folder with a snap. She told him it was just to make the refund process easier, but legally, I am the host, I am the client, and I just got kicked out of my own event. I pulled out my phone. It was late, a Saturday night, but Bennett Cross had been my lawyer for 20 years. He handled my husband's estate. He would handle this. I dialed his personal cell number. He answered on the third ring. Maggie. Is everything all right? No. Bennett. It is not, I said, turning my back to the wind. I need an appointment. Tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. Tomorrow is Sunday. Maggie. Bennett replied, his voice rough with sleep. I know what day it is. I need to terminate all legal liability regarding the event at Alder and Glass immediately. I need to know what my exposure is if I pull the plug on the payments right now. There was a pause on the other end, then the rustle of movement. I will see you at 9. I hung up. Lorraine was staring at me with a look of terrified respect. Can I come? She asked, her voice trembling. Please. I think she might have used my name too. I signed some papers for the caterer because she said she forgot her wallet. I didn't read them. I looked at this woman, shivering in her expensive gown, realizing she was just another casualty of her daughter's ambition. Meet me at the office at 9, I said. I got into my car and locked the doors. The silence inside was absolute. I sat there for a moment, watching the rain blur the lights of the conservatory. I was about to put the car in reverse when my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was a text message from a number I did not have saved, but I recognized the tone immediately. Mrs. Holloway. It is Darla. I have something the bride does not want you to see. If you want the truth, meet me at the diner on Route 11, the one open 24 hours. Come alone. I looked at the message, then back at the glowing venue. The wedding was still happening, but the war had just begun. I put the car in gear and drove toward the highway. The fluorescent lights of the diner on Route 11 buzzed with a sound that felt like a drill pressing into my skull. Darla Keene sat across from me in the vinyl booth. She looked nothing like the polished commander who had barred me from the bridal suite just hours earlier. Her blazer was wrinkled, and she kept glancing at the door. Without a word. She slid a small black USB drive and a stack of printed emails across the sticky table. I am not doing this because I like you, Mrs. Holloway, Darla said, her voice low and rapid. I am doing this because Kelsey is crazy, and because she threatened to stiff me on the final installment if I didn't help her. Curate the narrative. I picked up the top sheet of paper. It was an email from Kelsey to Darla, dated 2 months ago. Subject, the mother problem. Content strategy. Make sure you cut her out of the main processional shots. I want her in the background, preferably looking sour. We need the monster-in-law angle for the engagement metrics. The followers eat up the toxic boy mom drama. If we can get her to cry or yell on camera, that is viral gold. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I flipped to the next page. It was a draft of a legal document titled Retroactive Gift Affidavit. She was going to make Ethan sign this next week, Darla said, taking a nervous sip of her coffee. It reclassifies all your payments, the venue, the flowers, the catering as unconditional gifts. It waives your right to any repayment or input. She said she would threaten to leave him if he didn't sign it. She's monetizing my humiliation, I said, my voice flat. And she's trying to steal $50,000 in broad daylight. I looked at the invoices Darla had included. There was a charge for exclusive live stream rights and digital archiving, billed to a media company I didn't recognize. But the credit card number listed for payment was mine. I paid for the video rights, I said, tapping the paper. But the contract is in your company's name. Technically. Yes, Darla admitted, looking down. But since you paid the invoice directly, and the contract specifies that rights revert to the payer in the event of a dispute, you own the raw footage, all of it, including the audio from the mics she thought were off. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the sky was a bruised purple. I sat in the leather chair of Bennett Cross's office. Bennett had been my lawyer since my husband died, and he read documents with the precision of a surgeon. Lorraine sat next to me, looking small and terrified. You are the signatory on the master contract for the Alder and Glass Conservatory, Bennett said, peering over his reading glasses. That means, legally, the event is yours. You are the client. Kelsey and Ethan are, strictly speaking, the guests of honor. She humiliated me in front of 200 people. Bennett, I said. She kicked the client out of the building. Lorraine made a small, choking sound. Maggie, there is something else. You need to know why Ethan just stood there. I turned to her. Because he is weak. No, Lorraine said, shaking her head violently. Because he is scared. Kelsey told me once, when she was drunk, that she has insurance. She said she knows about something Ethan did in college, something that could ruin his license before he even gets it. She said she has a recording. My grip on the armrest tightened until the leather creaked. Ethan wasn't just being passive, he was being held hostage. The anger I had felt toward my son shifted into something colder, sharper, a protective instinct I hadn't felt since he was a toddler. So she is a blackmailer, I said. Bennett cleared his throat, drawing our attention back to the papers. A slow, grim smile spread across his face. Well, if we are talking about leverage, Bennett said, tapping a paragraph on the third page of the venue contract. Let me introduce you to the Morality and Conduct Clause. It is standard for high-end venues, but rarely invoked. He turned the document so I could read it. Section 14. Paragraph B. If any guest of honor or principal party engages in conduct that is abusive, defamatory, or publicly humiliating toward the signing client during the event, the venue reserves the right to terminate the event immediately. Alternatively, the signing client retains the sole right to determine the disposition of any withheld funds, security deposits, and media generated on the premises. In plain English, Maggie, Bennett said, leaning back. She didn't just hurt your feelings. By screaming at you to get out in front of witnesses while you were the legal host, she breached the contract. You didn't just pay for the party. You own the party. And you own the consequences. I looked at the clause. I looked at the USB drive in my purse. I do not want to just cancel the check. I said, standing up. I want to go see my son. I did not take to Facebook to air my grievances. I did not write a cryptic status update about betrayal or post a tearful selfie. Silence is loud. But a legal notice sent on letterhead from a reputable law firm is significantly louder. While Kelsey was likely refreshing her feed, waiting for my reaction to drive her engagement numbers up, I was sitting in Bennett's conference room, instructing him to send a formal notice to Alder and Glass and Darla Keene. The directive was simple. As the primary financial backer of the event, I asserted my right to control the distribution of all media assets until a full financial audit was completed. Lorraine sat across from me, her phone in her hand. She looked nauseous. I will give you the messages. Maggie, Lorraine said, her voice barely above a whisper. But please, promise me you will not destroy Ethan. He is caught in the middle. Ethan is a grown man. Lorraine. But I promise I will give him a chance to stand up. She slid her phone across the mahogany table. I scrolled through the text chain between Lorraine and Kelsey. It was dated 2 weeks prior. Mum? Stop telling me to be nice to her. If she looks unhinged, it is better for the narrative. The monster-in-law angle tracks well with the sponsors. Just let me handle the optics. I handed the phone to Bennett without a word. He scanned it and nodded grimly. This establishes intent to inflict emotional distress, Bennett said. It is not just a wedding gone wrong. It is a premeditated, hostile environment. I took my own phone out and opened my banking app. I had not looked at it since the previous night. I formally requested a freeze on the credit card I had provided for the wedding expenses, but the damage was already visible in the pending transactions. My stomach tightened. There were charges I had never approved. A $3,000 add-on for a champagne tower, an extra $2,000 for imported orchids. Then I saw it. A charge for a vintage Rolls-Royce rental and a 2-night stay in the presidential suite at the downtown hotel. The line item description read, "Sponsored by groom's family." She rented a luxury car and a suite for herself, and billed it to me as a gift I never gave. I said, showing the screen to Bennett. That is fraud. That is theft by deception. Bennett corrected. I stood up. I am going to the venue. I walked into the administrative office of Alder & Glass an hour later. The wedding reception had ended late the night before, and the cleanup crew was still sweeping up confetti. I requested to see the general manager immediately. When he arrived, looking tired and wary, I did not raise my voice. I simply placed the printed morality clause and the bank statement on his desk. My name is Margaret Holloway. I am the client of record for the event held here last night. I said, I was publicly humiliated and ejected from the premises by the bride. According to your own contract, that constitutes a breach of the conduct policy. I am now freezing all payments. The manager picked up the contract. He looked at the signature line and then at the clause. Mrs. Holloway. We assumed the bride spoke for the family. You assumed wrong, I said. I want to know what your protocol is when the person paying the bill is abused in your facility. If you release any footage from your house cameras or the live stream files to Kelsey Whitmore before this is resolved, I will include this venue in the lawsuit for facilitating the defamation. The manager paled. I will lock the files in the secure server immediately. No one accesses them without your written consent. As I walked out, I found Darla waiting by my car. She looked even worse than she had at the diner. She was wringing her hands. There is one more thing, Darla said, looking at her shoes. Kelsey made me sign an addendum, a back-end deal. Tell me, if the wedding video hits 100,000 views in the first week, I get a 5% bonus from her ad revenue. Darla admitted, her voice shaking. The whole thing, the shouting, the drama, it was all structured to hit that number. It was not a wedding. Mrs. Holloway, it was a content production. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. My son had not just been married, he had been cast as a supporting actor in a reality show he didn't know he was in. Thank you. Darla, I said. I got into my car. I knew where Ethan and Kelsey were staying. I knew I could drive there and blow the whole thing apart with the evidence I had in my passenger seat. But that would be too easy. And it would not save Ethan. It would only make him defensive. I needed him to see the cage he was in, but he had to be the one to unlock the door. I started the engine. I was not going to confront Kelsey. Not yet. I was going to see my son. I arrived at the Maple Turnpike Diner 15 minutes early. I sat in a corner booth, nursing a black coffee. I had not bothered with makeup beyond a swipe of lipstick. And I wore a simple grey sweater. I did not want to look like a victim, nor did I want to look like a combatant. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a mother who was done negotiating. When Ethan walked in, he looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. His eyes were shadowed with dark circles, and his shoulders were slumped. He slid into the booth opposite me without making eye contact. He did not order anything. "You ruined everything." "Mom," he said, his voice raspy. "Kelsey has been crying all morning. She says you are trying to sabotage our future before it even starts. Why did you freeze the cards? Why did you send a legal letter on a Sunday?" I did not raise my voice. I did not defend myself against the accusation that I was the villain. I simply reached into my bag and pulled out the printed email Darla had given me, the one outlining the monster-in-law strategy. I slid it across the table, smoothing the paper flat with my hand. "Read it." "Ethan," I said. He looked down at the paper. I watched his eyes scan the lines where his wife described me as a prop for engagement metrics. He read the part about making me cry on camera. He did not look surprised. He looked ashamed. "Did you know?" I asked. Ethan looked out the window, avoiding my gaze. I knew. She wanted to film things. She said it was just storytelling. She said we needed the sponsorship money to pay for the honeymoon. It wasn't supposed to be real. Mom, it was just for the internet. It was real to me, I said, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts. "Do you realize what you did? You stood there and watched me get thrown out of a wedding that I paid for. You let her treat me like a trespasser in a room that I rented." Ethan put his head in his hands. "I couldn't stop her. You don't understand." "Then help me understand," I said. "Because right now, I am looking at a man I don't recognize." He took a deep, shuddering breath. "She has a recording. Mom, do you remember that fight we had 3 years ago when I dropped out of grad school and came home drunk? She has the audio, but she edited it. She cut out her voice and your voice asking me to get help. It just sounds like me screaming violent things. She said if I didn't let her run the wedding her way, she would send it to the licensing board. She said I would never work as an architect again." I felt a chill go through me. It was not just greed. It was calculated malice. "That is extortion." "Ethan," I said quietly. "It is complicated," he whispered. "It is not complicated," I said, leaning forward. "It is criminal. Listen to me very clearly. I am not going to destroy you, but I am cutting every financial and legal tie I have with Kelsey today. The house down payment, the car insurance, the wedding debt, it is all being severed. I will not fund my own abuse." I paused, waiting for him to look at me. When he finally did, his eyes were wet. "But if you want to get out," I continued, "if you want to stand on the side of the truth, I will help you. I have Bennett. We can fight a recording. We cannot fight a life built on lies." Ethan looked at the table, his fingers tracing the condensation on a water glass. He looked terrified. "It isn't just the recording," he said. his voice dropping so low I had to lean in to hear him. This morning, I found out she submitted an application for a joint line of credit. She used my social security number. She forged my digital signature on a loan for $50,000. She said it was for our brand startup. Mum, I think she has already spent the money. I sat back against the vinyl booth. The wedding was not just a show, it was a cover for a financial heist. And my son was the getaway driver who did not know he was behind the wheel. Then we have work to do, I said. By noon on Monday, the internet had painted a target on my back. I sat at my kitchen table, watching the notifications stack up on my phone. Kelsey had posted a series of stories to her Instagram. They were artfully vague, featuring a black screen with small white text set to melancholic acoustic music. I thought family meant support, not purchase. It hurts when gifts come with invisible chains. Toxic love moving on. She never named me, but she didn't have to. The comment section was already a firing squad. Strangers were calling me a narcissist, a control freak, and a monster who ruined a young woman's dream day. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, but I simply took a screenshot and forwarded it to Bennett. Do not reply. Maggie. Bennett told me over the speakerphone a few minutes later. We are sending a cease and desist letter within the hour. If she posts one more word that implies your identity or questions your financial integrity, we file for defamation. We are not playing nice anymore. Lorraine called me shortly after. Her voice sounded thick, like she had been crying for hours. I tried to talk to her. Maggie, Lorraine said, her breath hitching. I went to the hotel. I told her she had to stop using us as props for her internet fame. I told her that what she did to you was cruel. What did she say? I asked. She didn't say anything. Lorraine sobbed. She laughed. She said I was bad vibes and closed the door in my face. Then I tried to call her, and it went straight to voicemail. She blocked me. She blocked her own mother because I wouldn't stick to the script. The script. That word kept coming up. Just then, an email notification pinged on my laptop. It was from Darla. The subject line was simply, "The rehearsal." Attached was a video file. I clicked it. The video was shaky, clearly taken from a cell phone hiding behind a centerpiece. It showed Kelsey standing in the empty conservatory, wearing sweatpants, facing the empty altar. She took a deep breath, then spun around, pointing a finger at an imaginary person. "Get out of here," she screamed. Then she shook her head. "No, that is too weak. Again." She reset her stance. She contorted her face into a mask of rage. "Get out of here. This is for real family." She smiled at the empty room. "That's the one," she said to herself. "That will get the clip." I felt sick. It was not a moment of stress-induced snapping. It was a performance she had practiced while I was writing checks for the very floor she was standing on. Darla had added a note to the email. She also gave strict instructions to security that you were not allowed to give a speech. She told them you were prone to drunken outbursts and would ruin the brand continuity. She was never going to let you speak. Mrs. Holloway. She just needed your credit card to clear before she cut the mic. My phone rang again. I assumed it was Bennett, but it was a number I did not recognize. "Hello? Is this Margaret Holloway?" a male voice asked. He sounded agitated. "This is David from Vantage Point Photography. Look, I don't want to be the bad guy here, but the payment for the wedding package just bounced. The card on file was declined. I froze that card," I said calmly. "You will have to take that up with the bride." I tried, David said, his voice rising in panic. She told me that you are the guarantor on the contract. She said you are legally responsible for the balance. It is $6,000, Mrs. Holloway. If I don't get paid by 5 o'clock, I have to send this to collections. And since your name is on the bottom line, I closed my eyes. Of course. Kelsey had given him my information, likely weeks ago, listing me as the responsible party for a service she had chosen. Send me the invoice. David, I said, do not send it to collections yet. I hung up and called Bennett immediately. She has spread the debt, I said, my voice hard. She has listed me as the guarantor for vendors I didn't even know existed. If I don't pay, my credit score gets destroyed. If I do pay, she wins. Get here now. Bennett said, Ethan is already here, and he has something to tell us about those loan documents. I grabbed my keys. I realized then that I was not just a rejected mother. I was the designated bag holder for a fraudulent production. And Kelsey had rigged the system so that if the show got cancelled, I was the only one who would pay the cancellation fees. But she had forgotten one thing. I handled risk assessment for a living, and I knew exactly how to dismantle a liability. The air in Bennett's conference room was stale, recycled, and heavy with the scent of old paper and anxiety. I sat with a highlighter in my hand, tracing a line across a bank transfer that had been buried deep in Ethan's joint account history. It was labelled Venture Capital Seed, a title that sounded impressive until you traced the routing number. This $15,000, I said, looking at my son across the table. You told me this was for her branding agency startup. You said it was an investment in your future. Ethan rubbed his face with both hands. That's what she told me. She said we needed liquidity to secure the domain names and the initial merchandise run. It went to a debt consolidation firm in Delaware, I said, my voice flat. She didn't start a business. Ethan, she paid off her maxed-out credit cards from her last project. I pushed the paper toward Bennett. He adjusted his glasses and pointed to the metadata at the bottom of the digital signature log for the loan application. Look at the timestamp, Bennett said. 2:13 in the morning on the day of the wedding, and the IP address traces back to the bridal suite Wi-Fi. Ethan, were you even awake when this was signed? Ethan looked sick. She woke me up. She was crying. She said she was terrified we wouldn't have enough money for the down payment on the house she wanted. She put the tablet in my hand and said if I loved her, I would trust her. I was half asleep. I just signed it to make the crying stop. Lorraine, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, finally spoke up. Her voice was hollow. It is a pattern, Lorraine said, staring at the floor. She calls it leveling up. She did it with her college boyfriend. She reinvents herself, finds someone with a clean record and good credit, and she merges. She consumes their stability until she gets bored or the money runs out. I thought this time was different. I thought she actually loved you. Ethan looked like he had been punched in the gut. The realization was washing over him, not just that he had betrayed his mother, but that he was the mark in a long con. He slumped forward, his forehead resting on the cool wood of the table. I am so stupid, he whispered, his voice cracking. I let her throw you out. I let her humiliate you because I thought I was protecting my wife, and she was just using me to pay for the show. I could have hugged him. I could have told him it was okay, but that would not have helped him. He needed to find his spine, not a pillow. "Look at me," I commanded. Ethan slowly raised his head. His eyes were red. "You can be ashamed," I said, locking eyes with him. "But you can still fix it. The only thing you cannot do is stay silent. We have the emails. We have the fraudulent loan application. We have the recording of her rehearsing her little outburst. We have enough to bury her in court for fraud and defamation." Bennett cleared his throat, a sound that cut through the emotional fog like a knife. He was looking at his computer screen, brow furrowed. "Actually," Bennett said, a strange note in his voice, "we might have something even better than a lawsuit." We all turned to him. I just checked the county clerk's portal to pull the marriage license for the file, Bennett said, turning the screen toward us. "It is not there." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked. "I mean, the officiant hasn't filed the return yet," Bennett explained. "And there is a flag on the application. It looks like it is missing a witness signature confirmation. Legally speaking, as of this moment, you are not married." The room went dead silent. The wedding had happened. The vows were said. The party was thrown. But in the eyes of the state of Pennsylvania, there was a gap, a bureaucratic hiccup. "The officiant is a friend of Kelsey's," Ethan said, his eyes widening. "She probably forgot to mail it in this morning. Or she is waiting for Kelsey to give the green light," Bennett said. "But right now, that license is in limbo." I looked at the screen, then at my son. This was it. This was the leverage we needed. Not to be cruel, and not to force a breakup if he truly wanted to stay, but it was the brake pedal on a runaway train. "We do not tell her yet," I said, my voice steady. "We use this. We make her sit down and face the truth before that paper gets filed. If she wants to be a Holloway, she is going to have to answer for what she did to this family first." The clock on the wall of Bennett's office felt like a bomb counting down. It was barely 2 in the afternoon on Monday, but the timeline was shrinking rapidly. Darla had sent another urgent message, her text appearing on my phone screen with a frantic vibration. "She has the final edit. It is scheduled to auto-post at 5 o'clock to catch the evening commute traffic." She sent a preview link to 3 major drama channels. In the cut, she makes it look like you were drunk and screaming at the servers before she asked you to leave. It is bad. Mrs. Holloway. I did not panic. Panic is for people who do not have leverage. I looked at Bennett, who was already typing furiously on his laptop. "Do it," I said. Bennett hit the enter key with a satisfying snap. "Notices sent," Bennett said, his voice calm and precise. "We just served the platform and the internet service provider with a takedown request based on disputed copyright ownership. Since you paid for the raw footage and the videographer's contract, and since the account balances are currently contested, we have claimed that any distribution of the material constitutes theft of intellectual property. If she tries to post that video, the platform's algorithm will flag it immediately. Her viral moment is going to hit a brick wall." I nodded, feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. I was not playing her game of social media perception. I was playing the game of terms and service. The door to the conference room opened, and Ethan walked in. He looked different than he had at the diner. The slump in his shoulders was gone, replaced by a rigid tension. He carried a backpack, looking like he was ready to leave town. "I told her I had to go to the site to check on a blueprint," Ethan said, his voice flat. "But I cannot go back there." "Mom." I cannot look at her knowing she is waiting for the likes to roll in while she destroys my family. Then don't go back, I said. Not yet. I slid a document across the table. It was a limited power of attorney, granting Bennett the right to audit and freeze any financial instrument opened in Ethan's name within the last 30 days. If you want out, Ethan, you have to cut the money supply. I said, sign this. It allows Bennett to go into those joint accounts, the ones she opened without your permission, and shut them down before she drains the overdraft protection. Ethan picked up the pen. His hand shook slightly, but he did not hesitate. I am sorry, Mum, he whispered, the tip of the pen scratching against the paper. I didn't want to see it. I know, I said softly. Lorraine spoke up from the corner of the room. She had been staring out the window, but now she turned to face us. Her face was pale, but her eyes were dry. I will testify, Lorraine said. If you need to prove premeditation, I will tell the judge what she said. I will tell them she planned the outburst. She told me 2 days before the wedding that she needed a villain for the second act of her content arc. The room fell silent. It was the final nail in the coffin of Kelsey's narrative. But the silence was broken by the harsh ringing of Ethan's phone. He looked at the screen and flinched. It is her, he said. He put it on speaker. Ethan Kelsey's voice shrieked through the speaker, distorted by rage. Why is my mother not answering her phone? And why did I just get a notification that the upload was blocked for copyright infringement? Did you tell your mother to do this? Ethan looked at the phone, his jaw tightening. Kelsey, you need to. Do not tell me what I need to do. She screamed. I know my mother is talking to you. You tell that traitorous witch that if she says one word to anyone about our private conversations, I will sue her for breach of privacy. And you better get home and sign a non-interference agreement regarding your mother. Or I release the tape. Ethan, I will burn your license to the ground. I reached over and tapped the mute button. She is terrified. I said to the room, she knows she is losing control. I signaled for Ethan to unmute the call. I leaned in close to the microphone. Kelsey, this is Maggie. There was a stunned silence on the other end. I am sitting here with your husband, your mother, and my attorney, I said, my voice steady and cold. We have the bank records, we have the emails, and we have a witness who is ready to swear under oath that you orchestrated a fraud. You are bluffing, Kelsey hissed, though her voice wavered. Come to the offices of Cross and Harrow tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. I stated, we are going to have a conversation about the validity of your marriage license and the $50,000 you stole. If you are not here, or if you post one single frame of video before then, I will hand this entire file to the district attorney. The choice is yours. I ended the call before she could scream again. The room was quiet, the air thick with the residue of the confrontation. I looked at Ethan and Lorraine. The trap was set. Now we just had to see if she would walk into it, or if we would have to spring it on her. The conference room at Cross and Harrow was silent at 10 o'clock sharp. I sat at the head of the table, flanked by Bennett and Lorraine. Ethan sat to my right, staring at the polished wood grain as if it held the secrets of the universe. When the door opened, Kelsey walked in like she was stepping onto a runway. She wore a white power suit, her hair perfectly waved, her makeup flawless. She was followed by a young attorney who looked like he had watched too many legal dramas and was eager to prove he was a shark. Kelsey did not look at her mother. She looked straight at me, her eyes cold and hard. You ruined my wedding because you couldn't stand losing your precious boy, Kelsey announced before she even sat down. You are a sad, controlling, old woman, Maggie. And now you are trying to bankrupt us because you didn't get your way. Ethan started to rise, his face flushing, but I placed a hand on his arm. I shook my head slightly. Let her speak. Let her put it all on the record. Her lawyer cleared his throat, opening a leather portfolio. My client is prepared to sue for emotional distress and breach of verbal contract regarding the wedding funding. We are also filing for a restraining order against Mrs. Holloway for harassment. Bennett did not even blink. He simply slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was the breakdown of the live stream monetization strategy. We are not here to discuss feelings, Bennett said, his voice dry. We are here to discuss fraud. We have the emails where your client scripted the confrontation. We have the invoices for the luxury items billed to Mrs. Holloway without authorization. And we have proof that your client intended to profit from the defamation of her mother-in-law. That is circumstantial. The young lawyer scoffed. Is it? Bennett asked. He pressed a button on the intercom. Send her in. The door opened again, and Darla walked in. She looked nervous, clutching her phone, but she sat down next to me. Kelsey's confident mask cracked. For the first time, she looked genuinely frightened. I have the audio from the lavalier mic check, Darla said, placing a small recorder on the table. She pressed play. Kelsey's voice filled the room, clear and sharp. Make sure you get the angle right when I scream at her. If I don't look like a victim, the sponsors won't pay out. Tell me to say it louder. The more humiliating it is, the more viral it goes. Kelsey's lawyer stopped shuffling his papers. He looked at his client, then closed his folder. He realized he had been lied to. This constitutes conspiracy to commit fraud and civil defamation. Bennett continued, relentless. Furthermore, we have flagged a loan application for $50,000 opened in Ethan's name. The IP address traces back to your client's phone. That is identity theft. We are prepared to hand that file to the federal authorities this afternoon. Kelsey slammed her hands on the table. You can't do that. We are married. His money is my money. Ethan stood up. He did not look like a boy anymore. He looked like a man who had woken up from a long, terrible dream. We are not married, Ethan said, his voice steady. Bennett checked the registry. The license hasn't been filed yet, and it never will be. Kelsey stared at him, her mouth opening and closing. Ethan, baby, you don't mean that. They are brainwashing you. I am done. Kelsey, Ethan said, I am cancelling the house. I am closing the accounts. I am sorry. Mom? He turned to me, tears in his eyes. I'm so sorry I let this happen. Kelsey's eyes darted around the room, desperate. She pulled her phone out. I will destroy you, she shrieked, her voice rising to a fever pitch. I have the tape. Ethan, I have the recording of you threatening me. I will post it right now. You will never work in this state again. I reached into my bag and pulled out a USB drive. I set it gently on the table. You mean this recording? I asked calmly. The one from 3 years ago. You seem to forget, Kelsey, that I was in the room when that argument happened. You edited out your voice. You edited out the part where I was begging him to go to rehab. You edited out the part where you laughed at him for crying. Kelsey froze. I kept the original, I said, because I always keep my records. She showed it to me, Lorraine said, her voice trembling but clear. She played me the edited version and bragged about how she cut it to make you look dangerous. She said it was her insurance policy. Kelsey looked at her mother, betrayed. She looked at her lawyer, who was currently packing his briefcase to leave. She looked at the recorder on the table. She slumped back in her chair, the fight draining out of her. "What do you want?" she whispered. "You will sign a settlement agreement," Bennett said, sliding a thick document toward her. "You will delete all content related to the Holloway family. You will issue a retraction for the statements made online. You will assume full liability for the remaining vendor debts, and you will never use Margaret or Ethan's name or likeness again. If you violate this, we file criminal charges for the loan fraud." Kelsey signed. Her hand shook, scratching the paper, but she signed. 10 minutes later, we walked out of the office building. The sun was shining, bright and clear. I took a deep breath of the fresh air. I did not have a daughter-in-law. I was out a significant amount of money that I would likely never see again. But as I looked to my left, I saw my son, head held high, free from the weight he had been carrying. And on my right was Lorraine, a woman who had lost a daughter but regained her conscience. I walked to my car, not as a victim, and not as a checkbook. I opened the door, knowing that for the first time in a long time, the only things I was carrying were the things that truly belonged to me. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today, so please drop your city or country in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people who need to hear it.